Once rapport has been established, the next step is to set the ground rules for the interview. This may seem like a routine administrative task, but it serves several important purposes. Ground rules establish a shared understanding of how the interview will be conducted, what the investigator expects from the interviewee, and what the interviewee can expect in return. They create a structured and professional environment that promotes fairness, protects the rights of everyone involved, and helps ensure the information gathered is reliable and legally defensible. One of the first ground rules to explain is that the interview is voluntary and non-custodial. Unlike a police interrogation, a workplace investigative interview is generally not intended to restrict a person's freedom of movement. The interviewee should be told that they are free to leave the interview, request a break, use the restroom, or pause the discussion if they need a moment. Explaining this at the outset not only helps reduce anxiety, but also protects the organization from allegations that the individual was detained against their will. Throughout the interview, investigators should avoid any actions that could suggest otherwise, such as blocking the doorway, locking the room, or creating an atmosphere where the employee feels they have no choice but to remain. It is also important to explain that there is no such thing as an off-the-record conversation during the interview. Everything discussed forms part of the investigation and may be documented in notes or captured through an approved recording process. This is not intended to discourage open communication, but rather to ensure transparency and maintain the integrity of the investigative record. The investigator should reassure the interviewee that their role is to record information accurately and objectively, without adding personal opinions or making judgments about what is being said. Another essential ground rule is the expectation of honesty and full disclosure. Investigators should clearly explain that they expect truthful, complete, and accurate information throughout the interview. A simple question such as, "Can I ask that you answer my questions honestly and to the best of your knowledge?" encourages the interviewee to make an early commitment to truthful communication. At the same time, investigators should remind participants to distinguish between what they personally observed and what they may have heard from others. First-hand knowledge is generally more reliable than speculation, assumptions, or workplace rumors. If the interviewee is accompanied by a union representative, legal counsel, or a support person, their role should also be clarified before the interview begins. Representatives are present to provide support and help ensure procedural fairness, but they are not there to answer questions on behalf of the interviewee or interrupt the interview unnecessarily. The investigator should explain that questions should be directed to the interviewee and that any concerns raised by the representative should be addressed respectfully and without disrupting the overall flow of the interview. Ground rules should also cover practical matters that help maintain an orderly interview. Participants should speak one at a time so that notes or recordings accurately capture the conversation. The investigator may occasionally pause to write notes or review information, and these moments of silence should not be interpreted as awkward or confrontational. In fact, brief periods of silence often give interviewees additional time to think and remember important details. Investigators should also remind participants not to discuss the interview or the matters under investigation with colleagues while the investigation is ongoing, as doing so may unintentionally influence the recollections of other witnesses or compromise the integrity of the investigation. Finally, it is helpful to manage expectations about the interview and the investigation as a whole. While investigators should avoid creating unnecessary time pressure, they can provide a general indication of how the interview will proceed and, where appropriate, explain the next steps in the investigative process. For complainants and respondents in particular, understanding what will happen after the interview and the approximate timeline for the investigation can reduce uncertainty and help build confidence in the fairness of the process. By establishing these ground rules at the outset, investigators create a respectful and predictable environment where everyone understands their roles and responsibilities. This not only promotes cooperation but also strengthens the procedural fairness, transparency, and defensibility of the entire investigation.